the European Ambassador, the DPP, the Chairman of the Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Commission, the Director of the Human Rights Commission, the various representatives of the universities and the various multilateral organizations that are here, ladies and gentlemen. I've been given some notes here, but I'd like to take this opportunity, first of all, to talk to you essentially about human rights as such. As you know, the Fijian Constitution, of course, has a number of rights, both civil and political rights, and also socioeconomic rights. A lot of them are rights that we actually have not had in Fiji before, in particular the socioeconomic rights. And I think it's very important for us to understand the need to develop the jurisprudence pertaining to human rights in Fiji. Not just for civil and political rights, but also socioeconomic rights. The reality is that there's always been a very dichotomous approach in the discourse regarding human rights internationally. And you'll see that some countries have a propensity or proclivity to focus predominantly on civil and political rights, whereas other countries, mainly countries in the Asian region, has an emphasis on socioeconomic rights. But we believe that there needs to be a uniform approach to the application of rights. You need to have civil and political rights and also socioeconomic rights. Indeed, of course, it has been argued that if you simply focus on civil and political rights and ignore socioeconomic rights, that actually fundamentally then leads to a breakdown of civil and political rights. Because if you have people who are hungry, who don't have access to homes, electricity, education, basic amenities like water, food, then that can actually lead to breakdown of law and order. Once that happens, then you of course can have chaos. And when you have chaos, when you have breakdown of the actual rules, then it leads to also a breakdown of civil and political rights. So they feed into each other. On the other hand, of course, if you have simply civil and political rights, which we have tended to focus predominantly in Fiji and in this part of the world, and we've ignored for decades socioeconomic rights, it can also lead to a number of disruptions to governance, as we have seen also in Fiji. And it leads to, of course, a lack of understanding of what are the fundamentals that is critical in a person's day-to-day life. So I think that's very important for us to understand, in particular those of you who will be arguing, and hopefully you'll be human rights lawyers, and I understand that's of course, one of the objectives is to have these moods, is to ensure that people become interested about human rights. And I think the other point that I'd also like to make in Fiji, our experience of human rights, unfortunately, we are a post-colonial society. Most post-colonial societies are actually the victims of what we call the colonial legacy. Colonial legacy has meant in many countries, not something peculiar to Fiji, that we have had societies or political systems predicated on the colonial system of divide and rule, which has meant in order to not have a common and equal citizenry, our societies have been divided along the lines of ethnicity or religion. And therefore it has led to post-colonial societies not having very strong institutions. His Excellency talked about building of a very healthy human rights environment. But I think what is more critical is that we need to be able to focus on building strong institutions. Many countries, of course, unlike similar to Fiji, have also a strong emphasis on personality-driven governance or personality-driven ways of solving problems. So you can see repeatedly since independence how some people have got away even though they've broken the law. So some of them are very much on the fringes, whether it's based on ethnicity, whether it's based on a class demarcation. Those who are privileged may not necessarily be brought before the law. Those who may have connections may not necessarily be brought before the law. Those who perhaps bought their way through the system have not been brought before the law. So I think it is very critically important to understand that in building the jurisprudence, in building an environment that has the application of human rights, you need to also ensure that you build very strong institutions. Strong institutions must go beyond personalities. Strong institutions must look beyond ethnicity, beyond religion. In fact, it should not even be a factor at all. I have been in many situations in my home country, which is Fiji, where some people have clamored for this this wonderful thing called human rights only when it suits them. But when it doesn't suit them, then they forego, human rights. Some people's fervor for human rights is based on purely because the victim is of a particular ethnicity or the perpetrator is of a particular ethnicity. So that really should not be the case. Those of you who are arguing about human law, who are going to be truly subscribe to the principle, universal principle of human rights, you must look beyond all of these demarcations, because there needs to be an objective test. There's objectivity in the application of human rights, and that's why it is called universal application of human rights. That's why you say it's universality of it. There have of course been a number of wonderful jurisprudence that have developed in other countries, of course. There have been some slight jurisprudence that has developed in Fiji. We have, of course, in the section 11 of the Fijian Constitution, and I must read this out to you because, there's freedom from cruel and degrading treatment. And it says every person has a right to freedom from torture of any kind, whether physical, mental, or emotional, and from cruel, inhumane, degrading, or disproportionately severe treatment or punishment. Furthermore, the human rights provision in section 11 goes beyond that. It says every person has a right to security of the person, which includes the right to be free from any form of violence from any source, at home, at school, work, or any other place. Now that actually is very interesting, because if you look at most of the provisions in other constitutions, in other jurisdictions, you won't find that level of that, what I call intervention in the private sphere as much as we have today in our Fijian constitution. Also similarly, this constitution, unlike previous constitutions in Fiji, has what we call not just the vertical application of human rights, but also the horizontal application of human rights. In other words, the rights are now not just simply enforceable vis-a-vis the state, but it's also enforceable in the private space too. So if you will see, for example, in other provisions, say in the previous constitution, you had certain clubs and societies that were actually exempt from the application, for example, of equal treatment of women on the basis of gender. Now they no longer can hide behind that particular provision, because that is now applicable also in the private sphere. So there's been, in law itself, constitutionally now speaking, there's numerous inroads that have been made. And I think we need to be able to, as young lawyers, as budding lawyers, you need to be able to take advantage of that and have that apply to you. I also wanted to, just cite a couple of cases also, and before His Excellency the Ambassador stole my speech as far as the first hour procedure is concerned regarding what the British have done with us. It's been fantastic. I'd like to just very quickly also highlight that too. But there was a case I remember, and it was actually dealt on a civil basis. There's a young boy at the age of 14 years old. This is in 2000, where he was alleged to have stolen tin fish. This is in Nandera, I think, the Nandera police post. He allegedly stole tin fish. So what the police officers then did was they handcuffed him to a post inside the police post in Nandera. And he's the boy's father, the surname is Voletti. He actually then took the matter to the courts, and the court actually then awarded $10,000 on aggravated damage and further $5,000 in punitive damages. There was an appeal to that, but the court actually upheld the actual ruling, but reduced the punitive charges. It's actually not kept the punitive charges, but reduced the aggravated damages from $10,000 to $6,800 by way of civil claim. But I think the point is that there are numerous such breaches that have taken place. Some of them, of course, get reported. Some of them don't get reported. I remember that when we were appointed in 2007, one of the police stations on a regular basis bought a bag of chilies, which they used for the interrogation. I'm glad to say that those two police stations no longer buy chilies on a weekly basis. But that was something that we had stopped, immediately. The reality is, as the Ambassador did talk about it, and I'd like to highlight to you, it is very important. I'd like to, of course, thank the Scotland Yard, the British High Commission in particular, has been working with the Fijian police force, where we have the first hour procedure been implemented. We also now, certain interviews are now being recorded. So all of this work has been done, but the reality also is that we need to be able to simultaneously provide the resources to the Fijian police force. Because you can imagine sometimes the pressure that's put on the police force. When the media, some of them probably more than others, tries to heighten criminal matters from a political perspective, and there's a huge public outcry, then if there's pressure on the police, if they don't necessarily have the right tools, if they don't have enough vehicles, they don't have enough forensic material, then of course the traditional way of getting a confession is essentially through using other means. I remember I was talking to a human rights lawyer from India once, and he said that he spoke to one of the police officers in one of the cities in India. He said, after I broke my first arm, I never looked back. So, of course, there are many countries that do have these kind of practices. The reality is you have to actually give the police force the right resources. Because if they do feel the pressure, then they may resort to other means too. I'm not making this a justification, but I think there needs to be an understanding of the circumstances in which all the different stakeholders work within. Similarly, if, for example, the DPP's office does not get the right type of investigations, then obviously makes their job a lot more difficult. If the confessions have been obtained through means that have actually not necessarily resonates well with the court, then of course you move voir dire hearings. I'm sure that with the new systems that have been put in place, there have been, from what we have been told, less allegations of police brutality, less voir dire applications, which obviously will help in the criminal justice system, makes the criminal justice system a lot more smoother. I think the other point, of course, which is very important, and hopefully those of you who are budding lawyers and those of you who may have, I saw a couple of lawyers sitting out there somewhere who currently practice. The unfortunate thing is that many lawyers today in Fiji do not actually offer their services on a pro bono basis. Unfortunately, there's been zero. Under the Fijian Constitution, the Legal Aid Commission is mandated to provide, and as provided in the Constitution also, a particular, the right of a person to have legal representation. Now, it may be okay if you're driving a Pajero and you get pulled over. Presuming you're a low-income family or a low-income person, your ability to perhaps get a lawyer is very limited. A lot of lawyers, of course, in Fiji do not necessarily move an inch without a few dollars being paid. So, for example, in section 13 of the Constitution, it says in subsection 1C, you have the right to communicate with a legal practitioner of his or her choice in private in the place where he or she is detained, to be informed of their right promptly. And if he or she does not have sufficient means to engage a legal practitioner and the interests of justice so require, to be given the services of a legal practitioner under a scheme for legal aid by the Legal Aid Commission. So today in Fiji, the Legal Aid Commission receives an unprecedented amount of money. It's in excess of $5 million. We now have Legal Aid Commission offices throughout every single major town and city in Fiji, even in places like Nambuwalu. We're moving out to the Lau Islands. We also got offices in Kandavu to be set up, Ovalau, Rotuma, and numerous other places. Now today, Legal Aid, of course, is what I call the largest law firm in Fiji. It's got the most number of lawyers in any one organization. So the fact of the matter, though, is the work of the Legal Aid Commission would be made a lot easier if members of the bar actually were able to offer their services on a pro bono basis. Many countries do that. In fact, some countries, it's a requirement for them to actually serve X number of hours on a pro bono basis to provide legal aid assistance or first hour assistance to those members of the fraternity. Unfortunately, the Fijian legal fraternity has not been that good in terms of providing that. So I hope that the new bunch of lawyers, new crop of lawyers, will actually be able to provide those type of pro bono services. Many countries, of course, as we mentioned last year in the Aegis conference, you can have a roster system. You don't have to do it every night. You can have a roster system where lawyers can, be rostered on a couple of days, or maybe a week, or a couple of days a month, depending on how many lawyers actually volunteer the services. So I think that's one of course, the realities of that. If we had more legal practitioners offering the services, we'll be able to, of course, provide this service a lot better. I think, again, I'd like to very quickly point out, essentially I think I've said what I wanted to say, But I want to, once again on record, acknowledge the work that's been put in place through the British High Commission. Of course, the EU has been providing assistance to legal aid. I think the reality is that with that type of input, we cannot progress further. You need people sometimes who have got much better learning processes where they've learned through their mistakes for us to be able to leapfrog into many of these new areas. We cannot take a linear approach to the adoption or the development of jurisprudence in our own jurisdiction. So we can actually leapfrog into those areas, and we of course look forward to such assistance, in particular when the assistance is very practical, is very tangible in terms of providing the actual practical outcomes for the people who are the subject of these kind of detentions. The other point I also like to highlight, I think there's been a number of cases. I've got some cases here. I remember I also practiced for a short period at the DPP's office, where I remember at one stage the Suva prison, the conditions in Suva prison were such where you actually did not have a demarcation between those who were in remand and those who were actually convicted prisoners. But also the conditions in the Suva prison at one point in time, the old prison where they used to have, hang people many decades ago, when prisoners, or even in remand prisons, when they went in, they would actually catch skin diseases because the conditions were so abhorrent in terms of cleanliness, in terms of the conditions. People are still using the bucket in the corner. So one of the things that we have done now, imagine using the bucket in the corner of 5 other people watching you. It's very dehumanizing, if you like. So we, of course, over a period of time have now built better conditions. Prisons, there's prison in Tabuni, in Ba. Lautoka now, of course, for the first time is getting its women's prison. We've only had one women's prison in Suva. So you could be, for example, a female prisoner and be breastfeeding. But if you come from Lautoka or Ba or the Western Division or even Banwalevu, well, bad luck to you and your baby, because you'd have to otherwise bring the baby all the way to Suva. Sometimes it became financially very, very difficult for people to do that. So we're now building a women's prison, not to say there are more women prisoners in Fiji, but essentially to provide that level of facility to be able to meet various international standards that we need to meet. Because I think the society can only be judged by how you treat people who are always on the fringes of the law. If you treat them with respect and dignity, and able to give them a second chance, for example, things like the Yellow Ribbon program, then you're saying to the rest of the community, the rest of the society, the rest of the nation, but look, we all need to treat everybody alike. If somebody has made a mistake, yes, they need to serve their time, but we should be able to reintegrate them. Because the rate of recidivism in Fiji at one point in time was 50%. In other words, 50% of the people who went to prison went back in. It's a very high rate. So the rate of recidivism, recently there has not been statistics released, but from the informal statistics we have received, the rate of recidivism in fact in Fiji has diminished. So these are some of the extraneous factors, if you like, in relation to persons who are detained, people who are being questioned first hour procedure. And again, of course, we need to be able to have that focus, but the point that I'm trying to make in all of this is that we need to take a holistic approach to the criminal justice system. You cannot simply, for example, talk about persons or detained persons and just discuss only one aspect of it. You need to be able to look at all the different factors. You need to look at all the other stakeholders, how they're involved. And only then, of course, we can actually have a very mature approach, a very mature understanding, an objective understanding, and indeed implementation of human rights in Fiji. I'd like to wish all of you who are participating in this movement all the best. Thank you very much.